Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Flutter meetup for Chicago and New York. For this event, we have Larry McKenzie from eBay Motors. It's so good to have you here, Larry.
It's great to be here, man.
It's been a while since we met for since the last time, like, but we had a hope a busy summer, and even though it's been weird, I hope that everyone was able to enjoy their time, spend some time with their family, friends, and loved ones. And it is a pleasure for us to be back. So the expectation for today is that we're gonna hear a talk from Larry about his experience at eBay, working on the eBay Motors app. But just a couple reminders before we start the event. First of all, we're building a community together. This is about learning, and if you have something to share, share it with others. Everyone is very welcome, and we're gonna keep it that way. So far has been an excellent experience to be a host for the Flutter community. So I want to keep doing that for years to come. And if you ever have ideas, you want to participate in the meetups, you even want to host an event, just talk to me. You can find me through the Flutter meetup for Chicago, through Twitter, plenty of ways. And the second thing is we just have to enjoy the event today, and that's it. And at the end, if you have any questions, I'm gonna be using the live chat on YouTube to collect what I think are the most important questions, so we can present those to Larry at the end. And if for whatever reason your question is not being asked, you can still follow up via Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever you think it's appropriate. But pretty much all I want from you tonight is to have fun. And that's it. I'm gonna get out of the way because you don't want to see my face. You want to see Larry. So Larry, again, it is a pleasure to have you with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm glad to be here. I'm really excited about it. Just a little background. I work at eBay. I've been part of the eBay Motors team, working there as a tech lead on the eBay Motors app. Prior to that, I worked on other applications at eBay. I've been there a little over 5 years and been working with mostly the same group of people. I'm gonna go ahead and throw up my slides here. There we go. So the idea behind this, what I kind of want to present, is give a little bit of context around what the eBay Motors app is, what my team was asked to do, and then really kind of get into how we did it, how Flutter helped us, how it might be able to help you. And yeah, and spend some time really kind of covering maybe some more interesting details that aren't otherwise available. Let's see here. So at the end of 2018, it's right before Christmas, we got notice that we were going to have an opportunity to build a brand new application. We needed to cater to car enthusiasts, and it was really going to be a vertical experience for buying and selling cars and trucks on eBay. But it needed to be different than just buying and selling cars and trucks on eBay. And there were some, complications. The eBay Marketplaces app doesn't actually have a flow that allows you to list your vehicle. So that was going to be an important piece. We were really allowed to kind of talk to users, do what we saw fit, and really learn what our users would want. But our only constraint in that was we had a tight timeline. We needed to basically have a beta on our CEO's phone in about 6 months, and we needed to be live with, they said, not an MVP in December. The folks I work with, we've been doing this for a while. We're fairly confident in what we could do, what we couldn't do. We were going to be half iOS engineers and half Android engineers. And with our team size, we really didn't feel that this was something we'd be capable of in getting a full featured product out that met the requirements of being special and kind of the base expectations of eBay users in that timeline, working as two separate groups with a designer and a product manager. So right around the same time, maybe it was days prior, Flutter became 1.0. This was something I was really excited about. I had been following Flutter since alpha time, and prior to this, I had been scheduling meetings and opportunities at work for my coworkers and I to kind of sit down and just play with Flutter. We'd investigated other cross-platform frameworks at the time when we were working on what we always call the global app. Is really like a white label solution for buying and selling in various eBay marketplaces. You might know it by brands like Kijiji or Gumtree. And that's what we were building, and we had, I think, 9 different countries we served from a single Android code base and a single iOS code base. And our cross-platform investigations leading up to that really didn't pan out. But this looked interesting. Flutter did it a different way. And so we started prototyping about January, right after everyone got back from kind of the holiday break in December. And the interesting thing, and it really played to our advantage at the time, was that our product and design, they really didn't know what we were building yet. In terms of, we had no specific requirements. So this bought us a little bit of time to do some technical exploration. And after prototyping, we spent a good number of weeks before we were convinced that this was going to be a good solution for us. We put it through all the paces and the questions that our leadership would ask us about until we felt we had a confident case. Good news, we got everyone to sign off on it, and in March we had our first product requirements. We knew what we were building now, and we had to move really quickly. And so we just kind of heads down, wrote code as quickly as we could. We were all learning Flutter concepts. We were all learning Dart as a language. It was great to have the 3 months lead up, so we got to work out a number of different things. But what we found, which was really interesting, is Flutter unlocked some things for us that we didn't think would even be possible at just the cross-platform level, and that we got to have a single backlog of features, and that there weren't divergent requirements across iOS and Android. We made agreements early on with design and product that we wanted to have a user experience that was as similar as possible on each platform, on iOS and Android, but still left the platform mechanics in place that users had come to expect. This allowed us to then have single sets of meetings. We didn't need to have design meet with the iOS team and then go meet with the Android team, and then people would bring up different problems and complications. It just unified that, and it was really effective. As we got to releasing, we realized it was a really incredible experience that we actually had unified releases. It wasn't like any platform got ahead or behind of any other one, which was very common the way we worked before this. And then hard problems that we ran into or things that are maybe not as fun to build when you're thinking about analytics or crash reporting or localization or responsive UIs. Those problems we really only had to solve once. That was just huge relief, and it's so much time savings. We got to have single sets of designs. So a few examples here on where we were looking at with different size screens and the tools we were using to understand how to draw these screens and build them, and this translated really well to Flutter. This single source was really helpful. This resulted in a really consistent user experience. So here we have an iOS and Android, and if it weren't for the phone frames or maybe the iconography, it would be very difficult to tell them apart. But we were really pleased with how this turned out. Other things that just worked out of the box. This is an example here of the responsive UI. These screenshots were each taken from an iPad where we were adjusting the multitasking window size. And just to give you an example of how the app was able to scale in different UI sizes here. Then also things like dark mode were not a really large challenge for us. Flutter had these considerations out of the box, and we were really happy. We made some mistakes early on as we were all newbies in this, but we were able to clean them up, and adding dark mode support was not that tough. Additionally, we found that things like localization, screen size, text size, all of this worked just really well. It was so smooth you didn't have to think about it so much. Just a quick rundown of where we're at. We have about 220,000 lines of Dart in this application. We achieved at this point in time about 98.3% shared code. We used a number of native platform APIs, various third-party SDKs, and all in all, we ended up writing very little Kotlin, Swift, and Objective-C. I think we have more code for our CI pipelines than we do native platform code. So kind of wrapping that up, we delivered, we got the beta in the CEO's hands. We did a public beta in September, then we went live, a full release on iOS and Android in December. We were really happy with it. Then we found we could continue. We added a major feature right out the gate in January. This was our Motors community. It is a similar forum concept, except focused on eBay listings specifically. Then we were able to follow that up the very next month with a real-time chat feature. This was something that eBay doesn't really have. Their messaging on the marketplace's app is more akin to email. We also added that in a threaded messaging style at the same time as chat, which was really incredible. And then we added escrow. So this was really huge for us as a platform and a business. And we're trying to move to being more focused on the transaction of the car. Right now, even buying, selling cars, you can go and most always you have to meet somewhere. You have to have some off-platform transaction that has to happen. And we've been working to unlock a entire end-to-end transaction happening on platform. So this is great. eBay Motors, the team, we love Flutter. Product loves Flutter. Design loves Flutter. We've had a great time, and around the organization, people have been really interested in what we're doing. It's really cool. We did a developer survey just to try and understand, because what we all felt we wanted to kind of validate. And with our engineering team, everyone said that they enjoyed developing with Flutter more than their former platform. This was actually a little bit surprising how strongly it pulled this way. And the same here, we did in the same poll, we asked people, based on what it would take them to develop on their former platform feature, how did they compare Flutter to that speed? So we had a few that felt this was a little bit faster, about the same, but the vast majority felt that it was more than twice as fast. And this survey was done, I think, in May of 2019. So that doesn't really matter as much as how our users felt. So they don't care that it's a Flutter app. They care that it works. And so far, we've had really favorable reviews on Android and iOS. There were a couple things early on, especially in the early days of 1.0, but the Flutter team was able to fix them really quickly. We ended up in a really good spot, and as you can see, our users really love what we came up with. We're really excited about that. I kind of want to transition now into more of the kind of interesting bits in the how we did this. So as two separate teams before we became the eBay Motors team, we worked very differently. Our Android and iOS teams, their working agreements didn't align really at all, and we almost didn't really talk unless we had to. And so in doing this, we realized, okay, we were taking people with very different backgrounds and ways of working, and we needed to come up with a way that we could work together effectively and quickly, because we didn't really have time to mess around. So this is kind of a very wordy slide here, but I want to take a moment on this, and it goes on for a few slides. This is taken right out of our repo and our contributing guidelines. We went and we kind of sat down early on and really aligned on how we were going to work. And this, we had some give and take. Some people were conceding things in order to get other things, but ultimately, this is what we came down with. And I think this is a major contributor to our success in addition to the choice of Flutter. We kind of came up with these guiding principles, and I just want to read this. I'm sure you read it yourself already, but these 3 principles compete in some ways, and 2 of them need to support each of our decisions. So we wanted to see how we could be valuable to the business, and we felt that delivering quickly was one of those value points. Additionally, we felt delivering a quality product that was really polished was one of those value points. And we felt that maintaining a healthy team and good morale across the employees was also ways that we can provide value. And each of these kind of stand against each other in some way. For example, you can over push on trying to deliver quickly and fail at getting good quality, or really burn out your people. You could overemphasize quality and deliver really slowly, also burn out your people. Or you could favor your people too heavily and not deliver quickly or quality. So that's kind of how we viewed this. And then with that setup and framework, we went and really started moving forward with decisions from there. So we wanted to say that, we preferred being consistent over creating perfect snowflakes throughout our code base. This allows people to drop into areas they may not have worked before and know exactly how to operate in that area. We wanted to make decisions fast. We knew it was possible that we might disagree, especially in adopting a new technology. And so we just made it kind of an easy rule that anytime people were disagreeing and they couldn't come to an agreement, that it just became a team vote. And I can think of very few times we actually had to exercise this. Having it in place meant that people actually came to agreements fairly quickly. Code should be no more complicated than required by the current tests. So we really wanted to defer complexity here, and we all agreed that we knew that automation testing was going to be really important to us. And then we wanted to say that we favor third-party code over first-party code. Every bit of code that we could not write was going to be valuable to us. Kind of moving on, we outside of those kind of guiding principles, we had a process outlined. And again, this is pulled right out of a repo, so it's a little bit verbose, but I just wanted to kind of give some details of how we work. So pull requests for all code changes. We wanted pull requests to always have corresponding tickets. We use Danger, which is a tool to raise awareness about issues and PRs. It's an automated tool, and I'll get into that a little more later. But ultimately, we wanted humans to be able to make the call on whether to move forward or not. We wanted to make sure that as a team, we agreed to follow all of our coding conventions. We didn't want to violate our lint rules, and we wanted to use consistent formatting, things that just make it easy to work together. We value collaboration. So in here, we wanted to really say that reviewing a pull request was more important than your own feature work. This allowed us to make sure that we never bottlenecked anyone. We preferred collaboration over working in isolation. It's very common on our team to find people always working together. It's something I'm really happy about, and I think that our code and our product has benefited greatly from that experience. So we also said that third-party contributions should be evaluated by the team. It should be a team decision. We favor smaller PRs so that they're easier to review. There's fewer merge conflicts. And we wanted to say any large work that the product was asking of us, we break down into smaller pieces. We value quality. So all of our behavior in our app, we wanted to have covered by automated tests. We wanted to make technical debt a conscious decision, something that we decided to do because it benefited us in some way with some plan to pay it off later. We wanted to make sure we kept things tidy. So we aggressively delete dead or unused code. We don't ever have commented out code checked in, and we aggressively prune branches. These things just make it easier to work together. We also encouraged autonomy in our tooling. It's kind of a funny thing, half of our team being former Android and the other half being former iOS. So we have some Android Studio people and some VS Code people, and that happens to be split pretty much down the Android iOS line. Under testing, we really wanted a shared definition of when to use the tools appropriate to us, whether those were unit tests or UI tests. And we needed consistency across that suite. And we created a goal of having no manual regression. We wanted, anytime we found a bug, we would put in an automated test and then fix the bug after the test failed. When working with design, we favor collaboration over documentation, in that documentation can sometimes get outdated or there can be mistakes there as well. And really understanding that, we wanted to have a great consistent experience across the whole app. And the best way to do that is to collaborate with design at all possible opportunities. And then these were some early things that we decided, and they mostly held true. for our app, we wanted to prefer stateless widgets. We felt that unnecessary introductions of state were great sources of bugs, and so preferring stateless was a good approach for us. So stateful only when local state was required. We preferred modularization. I'll get into that more a little bit, but we have a mono repo with many packages. We wanted to follow the Dart naming conventions from Effective Dart. Use consistent domain terminology so that when we're speaking with product, design, or other people around our organization, we're all using the same language to talk. We follow solid design principles and try and minimize any platform code we might end up needing to write. So let's take a second and peek under the hood here. It's going to get a little bit into the weeds, but so again, we have a mono repo. I think as of today, roughly, say 76 packages that are different Dart or Flutter packages we use. We prefer short-lived PRs. As an example, I took a quick grab from our GitHub today. I think we had 8 open PRs at the time. Most of them had been open today. And then we have almost 4,000 closed PRs that would be over the last, let's say, year and a half. And then just general high level, a number of commits, branches that are active right now, and 55 releases. So we cut a new release every single week, and we try and codify all of the rules as often as possible. We work in I'll say a Kanban hybrid, because it's not really strict on the rules, where we prioritize epics, and epics have prioritized tickets, and depending on where you're at, what epic you might be working on, you pull from those. But there's a lot of autonomy given to the team members. We really try to include all roles in all product research as early as possible. We try to do a lot of user research to understand what's really important to the users, and follow up with that throughout our product development lifecycle. A couple tools we use that might be interesting to some people. We use Figma for documenting designs, but again, prefer the collaborating with designers. Another great reason for that is that state is difficult to represent in static images, and having a quick conversation tends to be much faster. So we have many packages, as I said. This is just to kind of give you a hierarchy of what it looks like. One of those is the app package that depends on all of the others. That's where the wire up happens. And then we have a BFF pattern for our backend. So this is a node service on the backend side. It communicates to dozens of eBay services that are all internal. And then the Flutter app communicates purely with the BFF. What this has done is this allows us to control the API and the contract we have with the backend, and insulates us from changes that might happen through the other eBay services. Gives us a great point to catch issues and fix things without having to deploy new versions, or fix things if it broke for an older version. So this has been a really powerful pattern for us. This service is a node service, and that's because the team members we had at the time, that's what they knew. And it's gone really well for us. It's been really interesting. Let's see here. All right. So I wanted to take a minute and then really dive into testing a bit on the eBay Motors app. So maintaining that streak-free shine. As much as possible, we kind of codify compliance. So we use the danger as a tool. We have a requirement on every PR that we have 100% behavior coverage. I'll say effective 100% because there are some lines of Dart that we ignore, that we don't find valuable at all. And then, if we are fixing a bug, we need to add a test to make sure that we could reproduce the bug in an automated test and then fix it that way to prevent future regressions. Because we have a mono repo, we've had to do some kind of custom tooling a bit for our CI pipelines. And one of those things we do to kind of keep the feedback loop tight is we only run tests for code that changed and downstream dependencies that may have changed. And you can see that has an impact on the amount of time the overall job can take. We prefer it to be light. We try and parallelize our tests as often as we can. But even at that, when you have a significant number of tests, there is some level of delay, but it is something we're always trying to improve. So in our code base, we of course have very traditional unit tests. We don't have a ton of these, but there are a few places we do. And this is just an example of what it might look like. I don't want to spend too much time getting into it, but this is something we have some of, I would say, in that it really isn't the bulk of our code. The vast majority, we really try and test through the user interface. And Flutter makes UI testing really interesting. Coming from an Android background or an iOS background, testing the UI has been traditionally fairly difficult. And Flutter does a really good job here. I think, amongst the team, we would say that this is one of the areas that Flutter stands out the most, is that it has one of the best testing stories. So you have the ability to find elements on the screen, of course, do any interactions that a human might do. You can simulate the passage of time, which is great for animations, things like that. You can get pixel perfect screenshots, and this can be completely headless, so it doesn't need to run on a device or emulator or simulator. And we can actually control what platform we want to say is rendering, whether that be iOS, Android, or something else. So this really unlocked, behavioral UI or unit tests. So we can take, you see here on this slide, I have a little piece of UI, and we can actually make assertions about those independent widgets in really unique and powerful ways. So in this case, we have a test here that is validating what the data is displayed like. And we can do this in an interesting way. This is actual code from our repo. We've done a few things that might make this look a little different to some people if you're familiar with testing on Flutter. We created a harness function that exists in each of our packages, and it provides this syntax so we can say, given some conditions, when we do something, then assertions, and you'll see variations of that as I go through these slides. But I think these pieces are really interesting, and we have a number of what we would call like UI unit tests. I think we have a lot of these. We can also validate things like the UI updating properly. So this is an interesting test here where as a listing that's an auction is about to expire, there's a countdown on the screen, and this test, we actually move through time to make different assertions about that timer. So you can see we assert right out the gate there's 5 hours left. That's our initial expectation. And then we pump off 4 hours, 45 minutes, and 7 seconds. And we can then make an assertion about what this widget looks like in that state. These types of tools are what we mean when we talk about Flutter's testing story. This test won't take 4 hours to run. It'll run in milliseconds, and really gives us a lot of confidence around these individual units of UI. We can also do like UI integration tests, so where we have screens with lots of widgets. So for example, these are some test cases that's pulled out of VS Code here, showing a group of tests around creating a listing. This is, so if you had a car and you wanted to sell it on eBay Motors, then we see a number of tests, and should be able to post again after a failure, should be able to tap complete seller info if the backend returns an error. We can do a lot of really interesting integration tests, all of the UI, without ever actually rendering the screen on a device. And we can also do visual UI integration tests. So we've done a couple blog posts about this. This is functionality that does come with Flutter. That is to take what is a golden test in Flutter. So you can look into those for sure. And these are just different examples of different screens where we have a high fidelity screenshot of these various packages. And if you make a change in them and you don't update the test, you will have a test breakage. These are other examples where you can do really interesting kind of UI integration tests. Here, this is the same test with 3 different variations on a really small device, more standard iPhone 11, and then an iPad, all with the same exact widgets, same exact state. And this allows us, again, to create really high confidence, one, that we're not breaking these things, and two, what they look like even without running our application. We can do this for theming, right? We can change from light theme to dark theme and make those same assertions. And we can even do it for animations. So this is a couple screen grabs here of a wizard that we created in our selling flow. And this wizard has an animation where it expands. I'm going to show it to you in a minute, but I want to call out all the moving parts. So this title is going to disappear. We're going to have a number of text widgets that are going to slide down on the screen. These other text widgets are going to fade in. The content that is in the sheet is going to fade out a bit. So it's fairly complex, as you can see. And here's an example. You can watch this. It's going to go once fast at normal speed. And then it's going to go again at slow speed, which is a little probably stuttery over the stream, but you kind of get an idea of what we're talking about. There's a lot of interesting little complexities in this animation. All right. So we could, of course, write a test that is we're going to put the selling flow on the screen. And if you're not familiar with the language, pump is the language that Flutter uses for basically drawing a widget. So we're going to pump the selling flow. And then we're going to say that we can find the close button. Okay. And then we're going to click the expand button. And then we're going to say we don't find the close button. And this test is good. This is great. But it doesn't give us a lot of confidence about everything that happened in the middle. But it is a nice behavioral test that we can understand some pieces about this. We can also say a static screenshot here that we're going to pump the selling flow and it should match our golden that is collapsed. And if anything changes on this screen, that will break the test. We can go from there. An example, on the left is what we expected. That was the golden that we saved off. And on the right is the actual. Let's say you were working on a feature and you modified it. In this case, they look mostly similar, but you may have noticed that the check mark was missing in the actual. In this case, this would be a test failure. It would break, and we would get a nice image showing us why it broke. So again, we can do that with the expanded state. But again, it gives us more confidence, but it's still not quite an understanding of, somebody could change the interpolation of the animation to be like a bounce and it starts flashing all over the place. None of these tests would break. So then what we started to do is we created a library that allowed us to build on top of what Flutter offered for Goldens. And in this case, we started being able to do things like animations where we could run keyframes, capture them, and do a lot of really kind of interesting details. Now this stuff really created a high level of confidence. And there are areas where you can definitely overuse it. For example, if you were changing something unrelated, you'd break these tests. So we try to be really choosy about where we use them, but it's just a really powerful tool that would be very difficult on any other platform. We also found with our Golden Builder, this is the Golden Toolkit, we open sourced this several months back, so you can find it on pub.dev. But we had widgets that were really interesting, a lot of unique little complexities, and they grew over time. So this is a card from our home screen in the eBay Motors app. And in its basic variation, this was great, but then we were like, well, what's it gonna look like when it's expiring? So we get that countdown timer. And then we're like, well, there's other variations. All right, so what's this gonna look like if the reserve is met? Or if we make the font really big? And as you can see, tons of variations. So we created a tool that allowed us to do this really simply and easily and put them all into one screenshot, and really kind of highlights ways that we can see all of the variations of a widget. It's great for documentation, that you can understand all the ways it might be used when you're coming in to work on a new feature. And you can get really high confidence that you didn't break it when adding your new feature. So this was something you guys can take a look at. but we've been really pleased with how this turned out. Another neat feature of it is doing like multi-screen golden. So you saw this in some of the earlier slides, but we can define a list of devices that we want to test the same screen against. And then the golden assertion will actually check against each different device size, and also have an output with a screenshot just like these. And this gives us really high confidence that we're not breaking anything, whether you're on a really small device or a very large device. Again, something we've been really happy with. These tools have really helped us move quickly, because when you're adding a new feature and you're moving rapidly, you want to know that you didn't break it. And this worked out really well for us. Additionally, we can do full end-to-end tests. So at the app level, where all of our packages are integrated, we can still use Flutter Test. We can pump the entire app. We can navigate through the app, make assertions, and really document our kind of happy flows through here. And this provides a really kind of high level, high fidelity version of our test at the app level. This is something, again, the combination of these is really what has allowed us to move quickly. So I wanted to hit on multiple points there. I'm hoping that throughout this you had a chance to really identify maybe some questions, some areas I didn't dive that deep, and I hope that you can get them in chat and we can go over them that way. I know there's a lot of material there, a lot of different tools, but we'll go ahead and open it up for Q&A.
I'm speechless. This was an amazing talk. I told you before, and I will tell you now, that it feels incredible to see the level of amazingness, right? In reality, the eBay Motors team is doing something really complex, but it's followed by really simple APIs. I love the focus on testing personally. That's I was just getting excited. You couldn't see my video feed, but I was like, oh, that's amazing. You folks are pioneers of Flutter and quality when it comes to developing, right? And the level of scale that you are approaching, not that many companies out there are getting to that point, and it's incredible to see that you're sharing that information with us, right? And the level of detail that you put into this. One comment that I've had in the YouTube channel, though, is that folks are really asking to open source the test harness library.
Yeah, that is on our roadmap, actually. There's a ticket already for that. It's something, we have a couple packages that we're looking to open source in addition to it. It's just a matter of kind of getting time and prioritizing it. And it's really valuable. When we did the Golden Library, it really caused us to go back and even look at our APIs and really rethink a lot of things as we were open sourcing it, which was insanely valuable for us as a team. We found that we would go through and we would make changes to the tool, because we were like, oh wait, this actually makes it so much easier in our setup. And we had things that were, I'll say a rougher draft of what is now the Golden Toolkit. It was working for us, it was functional, but it wasn't as easy to use. And I still think there are a lot of opportunities to improve the Golden Toolkit as well. But yeah, the test harness is definitely something that we want to put out. It makes it really nice to be able to write readable tests. And that was something that was really important. We wanted our tests to document our behavior in a way that anyone could come in. Something that was kind of interesting for us. So our team was originally allocated 2 quality engineers. And so after a few months into the project, we actually converted them to Flutter developers. They started picking up features, and we don't actually have any quality engineers anymore. We go off, I will say, primarily automated regression suite. When we bump dependencies or areas that we may have more blind spots to with native plugins, we'll spend some more time doing a manual test, and we try and document manual test cases for those. And then we do have a half-hour, I think, bug bash every 2 weeks, where we just kind of do some exploratory testing together and talk about things. But it's really light on the kind of quality effort there that we have to put in. We try and move as much as we can up front.
I'm really, really glad to hear that, right? Like, because I think that sometimes for projects, testing becomes like an afterthought. And the moment that you actually don't start a project with testing in mind, you don't realize the amount of like effort and energy and time and at the end of the day, like for a company money that we put into things that it's because we didn't like tackle them from the very beginning. And the case of like working with QA engineers that then you can turn into like actually like feature developers to keep bringing value to your customers, that is like a super powerful story, right? And like still like as you were telling us, like you still rely on automation, right? Like you still have to create like sometimes like maybe like internal libraries to like support that level of scale that you have. So at that
Yeah.
point, like that domain knowledge might be handy, and like maybe you can still have like those QA engineers focus on something like that. But at the same time, it's coding. We should be able to jump to different parts of the code base, right? Without like being like, oh, I don't touch that and all that stuff.
We have a teammate. His name's Kaylee Davis. He's very passionate about testing, and he's also really passionate about engineering our test suite. Um, yeah, he likely, I would say, and he would probably agree with this. He cares more about our test code than our production code,
Oh,
and he's been a strong advocate on the team for this, and it's been great, honestly.
yeah. Another thing that I wanted to mention was that I really enjoyed that you shared your team values with us. That's something that like when we talk about like conferences and talks, we tend to focus on the tech side of things. How do we do testing? How we solve state management and all that stuff? And actually, that is kind of like secondary. It's a consequence of the culture and the team dynamic, right? And the fact that you share something that is so most of the times private with us, like it's to me, it's like an incredibly value. Like I said this publicly a while ago when you guys published the article about like I wish this was the article that I had the chance to write when I was
Oh
working
yeah, yeah, I
at the
did see that.
NW.
Yeah.
And I'll say it again because with that set of values and principles, especially when they're defined up front, like that doesn't mean that they're written in stone. Like it's work in progress, right? Like you have to maintain them as if they were like a code base. But that gives you a framework for a team, for a company to move forward, right? Like and to understand what are the areas where you're gonna do trade-offs and like what are the areas where like you're gonna like push forward like even more and keeps everyone on the same page. So to me this is kind of like I've been talking with a lot of like different like teams and all the stuff to get that done from the very beginning, and sometimes they look at me like, why? It's like, well, that's why. That's why.
I
So
I really like feel strongly about those upfront agreements, and that it sets expectations for everyone on the team. Um, you know, and maybe you have team members that don't need it. That's just what they would do anyway. You know, um, but having it documented and like sitting down and actually agreeing to it, and writing it in your code base is powerful. You know, and understanding like it's not permanent. You know, it's changed over time. Little things are either added or removed or tweaked as we had to adjust. It's not meant to be, the law. It's meant to be like, this is how we work
yeah,
together, and these are the areas we agree, right? This is what we're trying to do. More than just build a product. We're trying to be a really good team that can build multiple products, that can build any product, and that's critical. Our team has had very, very low turnover. Um, Matter of fact, trying to think, I can't remember the last time we lost a team member.
oh, that tells a lot.
Yeah,
We work in tech,
specifically
like
on the engineering side. And most of the people that I work with, I think I've worked with for at least 3 years, if not 5 years there.
that's amazing. That is a very powerful statement.
Yeah, it's
Um,
it's been really incredible, and I think that even if we switched up or did something different, having that really makes all the difference. And Flutter unlocked a lot of it, right? Like being able to come together like that, being able to reduce overhead in meetings. I would say we took a little bit of a non-traditional approach to how we did this, in that we didn't follow any specific I'll say agile dogma. We weren't really hard on rules. We talked to each other, we gave feedback, we made adjustments. Um, early on we had, common like grooming meetings, and we got to a point where we actually just felt like there wasn't a lot of value in them, so we just got rid of them. And we were like, let's just see how it goes. We've never added them back. Um, there's been really interesting things like that. Also, the way that we pull in work. We're not a particularly large team, especially for eBay, um, in that way, and it's been really enjoyable to kind of watch. And I think everyone's open to changes when needed, but for the most part, it's just been getting work done and having fun.
From what I can, and I'll jump into questions from the chat in a second, but like from what I can hear from you, like of course there's like a lot of effort and energy put into this, but it pays off to your customers, but also to your team, right? Yeah. But it's amazing to hear that, like, yeah, like that's the story of software development. Like when you have like a set of like values, right, and then you start like trying something, it works, right? It doesn't work, then okay, let's try something else, and it's gonna be always changing. But there's also like a good story in there of about like when we're writing software, like there's also like an ideal like point where like the size of the team, the overhead of meetings and all that stuff, all the things start to click, right? When you start with the right foundation. And it seems like you start with that. So I mean, I'm no one to say anything or to give advice, but like take care of that, because when you find that, it feels amazing.
Yeah.
Right.
I agree. Well, you can get the questions, but I do think, as you're looking at the questions there, I just wanted to say something that some audience members might be interested in. I didn't really cover it when I was going through the slides. Is that using a new technology at a large company isn't always easy, right? From the engineering perspective, it was considerably easier to convince our skeptical iOS engineers of Flutter, because it stands out. It turns into a wonderful development experience. And we all praise it now. We love it. It's regular to see in Slack someone say, I love Flutter, check out this crazy thing I can do. That would be really hard or annoying or impossible. But it's in an organization, convincing leadership can be considerably harder. For us, right, it was definitely something that we were asked about from, scalability, accessibility, localization, these different areas that are must-haves, because of expectations of our users. And so, for us, one of the, I think, most powerful arguments, because of what was asked, is that, Flutter was chosen not only because we thought it was going to meet the needs, but we thought it was a risk mitigation strategy, that we were, considerably more likely to be successful and deliver the product that we were being asked to deliver by choosing Flutter. And that's ultimately what won over our leadership.
I'm gonna create posters with that statement. Like that has to be printed in every single office using doing mobile. Like we use Flutter to mitigate the risk and be successful. Yeah, that's great. All right, so from the chat, what do you think is gonna be the $1 million question?
I have no idea.
So there's a lot of interest in knowing how you manage the state of the application.
Oh yes, that could have been the $1 million question. I should have guessed that. This is really interesting. My coworker Corey Sprague and I, we put out the blog post recently about the app that has a lot of content similar to this talk, but we're working on another one that we're thinking about later this year, and we want to cover this topic because it is of such interest to the Flutter community. So we use inherited widgets a lot. We use provider, not so much as a true state management mechanism, but usually providing access to you might say custom controller objects that we create for various domains. Now they're not dissimilar to say a block, except we don't use streams. So we really prefer value listenables combined with value listenable builder. There's no empty frame like at the first render of a stream. They're a lot easier to understand. Um, I think that's something that's been interesting is like for me, I came from Android coming into this, and I had been working with RX Java and RX Kotlin for a couple of years, and I was very comfortable in streams. And right out the gate, that's where I headed because that's where I was comfortable. But I quickly found like as a team, it wasn't really making sense because I was spending more time explaining streams to team members than I was anything else. And that right there, is as we say, that's a smell that you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
And so that's when I think again, I'll probably credit I think Kaylee Davis with this. Early on, we'd done a block or two or three, I think, in our app early on the first few weeks. I think before we got product requirements even, and he challenged on that, and he's like, I think the complexity is too high here, and so he put out a few PRs just as experiments to see how people felt about it, and we really landed with something that we haven't really seen documented anywhere, except in the Flutter code base itself, right? If you're looking at an editable text and it has a text editing controller, this same kind of concept we see repeated over and over, and we really just kind of clung to that. And so I don't really know how to define it, but in talking to my coworker Corey, and then we're kind of prepping for this blog post coming up, we really were like coming to the understanding that it's really more about boundaries than it is state management. If you have good boundaries, it doesn't really matter what state management you use. Like, so for example, if we did it right, and I think in a lot of times we have a pretty good setup, but I should be able to go into any one package in our code base and throw away that controller and replace it with a block and write all the code to wire it up, and all my tests should still pass without modifying any. And so that's really what it comes down to. So for us, we didn't go with streams. That's why I won't say we're using blocks, because there's no streams. But we do have a more central place that handles the majority of the business logic in a domain. Sometimes there's multiple controllers depending on how complex the domain is. Sometimes there's different mechanisms and rules that we've learned, and as we grew, to create better boundaries for ourselves and anyone who might enter the domain. But
state management is such a hot topic in the community, and there's like wars about state management. And
there is, yeah.
And in reality, like, it should not be. What matters is what you said, is the boundaries, and can you test it actually, right?
Yeah.
Because after that, it's about picking a tool that makes you and your team comfortable, right? As you said, like, you have an experience with observables, you feel comfortable, but then you test that with the team, and they're like, well, maybe we have to think about a different alternative, because like this idea of streams, observables, like it doesn't click on with us, right? And we believe that the complexity is too high. So then you try something else, and as long as you scope properly, as long as you define your boundaries, you're like what goes in and what goes out, right? Like, then how you manage the internals of those components should not matter. So for the people in the chat and all the stuff, state management, actually, it's not a word. It doesn't matter. Like, just make sure that you test it properly, and like you'll be able to use like Block or Redux or Movex, or just a simple set state. Yeah, you can write an amazing application with all those tools. It doesn't matter what you pick. It's a personal preference. There's no better or worse.
Yeah. And that's really what we found. And there are cases, where local state's all that's required in our app, and it's just simple set state. No big deal.
We had a similar a similar experience. Like, that's why like my teammate Felix started writing Flutter blog, right? It's like, in our case, we felt kind of like really comfortable with the streams, but we noticed that there were a lot of people that they were not feeling comfortable. So we were like, how can we reduce the amount of RX code that we write, right? And we didn't limit like the use of RX, right? With like Flutter blog, at the end of the day, it's based on streams. But like pretty much he reduced like having to write. He created like a tiny state machine, right? It's like, okay, you don't think about how to like transform your data and map it and keep the subscription open or not. Like it's just like, okay, for this event, like you can like have these things, but it doesn't matter. Like we've had applications, especially like for me now that like I jump between projects and all the stuff, where like they were using all those different tools, like, and the application was amazing, and your customers, they won't notice, like
Yeah.
unless you put in the open source license plate. So so another question that we had was about Flutter Web, like if you have explored Flutter Web or not.
Yeah, so our exploration of Flutter Web has been fairly limited. I've done, due to like plugins that we used that at the time weren't web compatible. A lot of them are getting web compatible now, so I'm really excited about that. But I haven't done another exploration of it. It was, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago or more. I think, well, probably Flutter Web beta when that was announced, that I took a crack at just building for the web just to see what we had. And the way it's set up right now, there's restrictions in place. So if it recognizes a plugin is not compatible, it actually doesn't build. So I haven't made it past that. I've done samples and demos and things like that with it, and I think that's really interesting. We're looking forward to it. I have done builds for Mac. I built the eBay Motors Mac app for Mac, and that works really well.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. And that's just more for fun, like shopping around the office and letting people like see and play with it and just see what we can do. I think there's a lot of opportunities for us to use Flutter Web, and even Flutter for desktop environments is really interesting. A large portion of our business is related to car dealerships that have tools we provide to help them get their inventory into eBay's marketplace. And so I think there's definitely some opportunity there for us to utilize what we've written to create a Flutter target that is for desktop that they could benefit from.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Okay, this is gonna be the last question. It hasn't been covered in the chat and all the stuff, but I wanted to ask you because like you have like a big amount of experience, right? Like you've been working with teams and all the stuff. And Flutter, while it's not a new framework, it's attracting a lot of like new developers, folks that are kind of like just getting like started with coding and they want to do apps and they try Flutter. So what would be your piece of advice to kind of like that, like those folks that are like trying Flutter for the first time, they see the potential and all the stuff, but like they're still kind of like, oh, I don't know how to get to the next level, or like how would I like, what would should be like my area like where I need to focus in order to maybe like land to a job, or like be like that extra like provide that extra level of quality and like a scale to when working with a team.
For sure. This is actually something I'm really passionate about. Prior to working at eBay, I worked in television. And so my Android experience, from 2010 to 2015, was pretty much entirely self-taught. I just had free time at my job, and then I learned to code in my spare time. And then, later landed at eBay, which was an incredible experience. I even have a coworker that works with me now, who actually I worked with all the way back then, and he had started doing Android stuff and kind of he'd gotten promoted, which meant he didn't have free time anymore, so he couldn't learn anything. And after I'd been at eBay for a while, he had messaged me, and he's like, okay, I'm gonna try coding again. How do I do this? And now he's been a developer for several years, but early on in this project, he was an Android developer working at a different company in town, and I was like, dude, you have to try Flutter. Like, check this out. Like, get into it. I know it's gonna be weird at first, and he spent some time on it and really just kind of dived into learning it and playing with it. App Brewery put out a great little course for $10. I recommend it to everyone. I think every one of my team's gone through it. So depending on where you're at, right? If you know a few things, then you can probably dive into Flutter and get a really long ways. The best things to me are, for my learning style, I like to identify something I want to build that I don't know how to build, and then just learn piece by piece how to get there. It keeps me motivated and engaged in the learning process. rather than saying, okay, learn this tool or learn this language and syntax. I really prefer to have a project that forces me to use the tool, and in doing that, then I ultimately learn it, even though I'm not worried about having the best code. Just worried about getting something functioning a lot of times in those days. And then, as you grow, I would say spend time on testing, right? It's intimidating and hard to get into, but it's really valuable even as an independent developer, because you have to think about it a little more. You'll spend a little more time thinking about how to build the thing. And sometimes that means like you built it, like you tried and you got through it, and now you have an idea, okay? And then just like delete it, and then write the test and go through writing it again. Sometimes you'll see you write it differently, or in that maybe you get really good at it and you write it the same. There's a lot of really interesting things there, but it's about just making the time and putting in the time and doing it. If it's something you like and enjoy, I don't think you'll really have a lot of trouble with it. The coworker I was mentioning earlier, he had a really hard schedule, and he did a morning shift at the TV station, but he would get up at like 2 a.m. and from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. he would write code, and then he'd go to work. And I think it took him 9 months to a year before he landed his first job on Android. But it was really incredible, and I always really admired how he did it. Like, I feel like I had it easy because I had free time at work. It didn't cost me anything. I just was bored. Some people read books, some people played video games, and I was like, well, I need to do something productive. But anyway, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. And if you run into blocks, reach out to the community, especially in the Flutter space. The community is incredible. There's a ton of code that's available. There's a ton of samples. With all the new tools and neat gadgets, from being able to run Dartpad and Flutter Web, like on the web, like just writing code and seeing it. You can collaborate with people. You can get great answers. And I haven't run into a Flutter person yet that doesn't want to help someone learn Flutter. So
That is really, really true. Like, I think it's not that it's a special community. This is what a community should be, right? But fortunately, sometimes in tech, that doesn't necessarily happen. But like, I'm very proud to have so many like good friends that I haven't even met in person, but they're like part of the Flutter community, and like I've been learning a lot from them. Uh, I know that in occasions, like I had the opportunity to actually share my experience with other people, and it feels incredible when like they're not just like waiting to be nitpicky to mention like, oh, you said this instead of that or whatever. Like, no, they're just there to listen, to support you, to have a conversation and to build something together. So I'm very glad for that advice. To add to that, I have an advice. If you wanna wake up easily at 2 a.m., get a puppy. It works. uh, Mine, like, not at 2 a.m., but at 3 a.m. every night is like, ah. So, just say no. Jokes aside, I really appreciate the time that you've shared with us. It has been amazing. I know that everyone that has been like watching the talk like had like really good feedback. They super engaged on like the YouTube chat. We could go for hours, but like I know that you have a family and it's dinner time somewhere else, right? But again, like thank you so much. And if you wanna say something else like before we end the stream, like sharing your like Twitter handle so people can reach out, or like this is your 30 seconds of glory before we
No,
close.
thanks, man. I'm honored to get to be here, to get to talk about it, and talk about what my team has done. Right, like it really is a team effort, and I'd give a shout out to every single one of them. They're all incredible people, and it's the collective effort that actually makes building it possible. Any one of us in a box, maybe in a lot of number of years could build something like it, but together that's what's great. And again, the entire Flutter community has been incredibly helpful. I'm always finding people, whether that's at events or online or Stack Overflow or anywhere, on Discord. Thank you all. Thank you for participating. Thank you for contributing. We look forward to contributing more. It's been really great. Yeah, and I'm sure you can find me. I think my Twitter handle's in the event description, but it's at Father and Legends, because I have 4 kids. They're my 4 legends. But anyway, yeah, thank you so much for the invite. I'm glad we could do this.
Awesome, thank you. And for upcoming events, during October, at the end of October, we still don't know when, but probably you already know that it's Hacktoberfest. So DigitalOcean organizes this kind of like month-long hacking event where, like, if you contribute with please good, valid, meaningful pull requests, like if you do 4 of those, you can get like T-shirts, stickers, like things like that. So as part of VGV, we already put a video last week about how to contribute to open source, especially related to Flutter. We're gonna follow up with a few events where we're actually gonna do a live coding of a open source package. I'm not gonna reveal yet what's the surprise, but like I hope that you enjoyed. And that's it. We'll see you in the Twitters and LinkedIn's and Slacks of the world. Bye, everyone. All right, that was fun.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.